Hey, my kid might start school in just a few short weeks, but that doesn't mean summer's over yet, and I have the perfect novel to add to your summer reading list if you're looking for one more great book to read. But I also have a reading project for myself for this summer. So stick around and you'll find out what small press I'm going to be reading for the month of August. I have the perfect summertime read to share with you all here, and it's called Scorpionfish by Natalie Bakopolous, and this is published by Tin House Press. Tin House is a wonderful independent publisher, and they publish books of poetry, nonfiction, and fiction, which is, in their words, artful, dynamic, and original, and I couldn't agree more. Let me tell you why this lovely novel is a great book for summer. And it's not just because the cover is super summery. Scorpionfish is the story of Mira, who is in her late 30s, maybe early 40s, and she returns to her childhood home of Athens, Greece, shortly after the unexpected death of both of her parents. And she goes to Greece to clean out her parents' apartment. She lives in Chicago. She lives and teaches in Chicago. And while we don't know too much about her life back in Chicago, during the novel, we get to meet and fall in love with all of the wonderful characters that she knows and loves in her life in Athens. Her family friends who live in the area include an older artist named Natalie, and she's a relatively well-known artist and is quite a character and plays a big role in the novel. And then also included in the novel are Mira's good friends, a married couple who have taken in a young boy, a teenage boy who is a refugee who has arrived in Greece. And then there's also in the apartment building, we meet some of the characters around the neighborhood, but also in the apartment building there's a character named the Captain, and he lives in the apartment next door to Mira's apartment and next to her parents' apartment, and they share a balcony. And so they start having these conversations on the balcony. There's a screen that kind of blocks them so they can't actually see each other, but they can talk to each other. And there's a bit of romantic interest that builds there. The novel is actually told in alternating chapters between the Captain and Mira. In my July $2 radio reading update, I talked about books that are kind of jarring at first when you first open them up, and how that can be such a joy to read. And I'll link to that video in the end if you want to check that out. But this was actually quite the opposite. This was a smooth entry. The prose is beautiful, it's really well and smoothly told, and that's just as much of pleasure to read as something that puts up a bit of a challenge. For that reason, I think this is a great summertime book because it really is quite a smooth, beautifully told story. This novel is about grief, but it's also about who we belong to and where we belong. What happens when our families and our loved ones are no longer with us? Who do we belong to at that point if we're alone? And what does it mean to belong to a place? What does it mean to belong to a place that you can no longer go back to? What happens when you're uprooted from that place? There are a lot of threads throughout this book that lead back to those questions. Mira has lost quite a few of her loved ones through death, through breaking up with her boyfriend, and she also is kind of lost in between these two homes of Chicago and Greece, is not quite exactly sure where she belongs. The Captain similarly has lost his job, his marriage is falling apart. He kind of doesn't know exactly where he belongs either. Then we have the young boy who is a refugee and literally cannot go back to his home. He's also not with his family. So where does he belong? Who does he belong to? He's kind of building these relationships with this new family, but does he belong to them? They kind of think that he does, but he doesn't. So it really is about the ongoing crisis of being a refugee and the traumatic impact of losing homes and loved ones, and what does that mean for a person. It's also a novel about space and occupying space. Who occupies a particular space? Who gets to occupy a particular space? What does it mean to occupy a space? What does that mean for you? What does it mean for the space? How does the space change your identity? How does your identity change the space? So this is set during the summertime, which makes it perfect for summer, both in Athens, but also on an island where Mira and the captain, each of their families have family homes on this island. And so part of the novel is set in the city of Athens and part is set on the island. So to me, this is a recipe for a perfect summer read because it is set somewhere that's far from my own home. It makes me think of summer travels. It's actually set in the summertime, so it feels hot and sweaty, and there's a lot of scenes on the beach. Also, the experience of reading it is really smooth. The prose doesn't really challenge you, but also if you sit with it for a while, the themes and the story are really deep and thought-provoking, and that to me is kind of a perfect summertime read because you can get into it and enjoy the story, and we have your kind of summertime brain, but it does allow you to open up a deeper world and to have a deeper experience with the novel as well. So to me, that's perfect for summertime. You want something that is easy to engage with, but also it's the kind of novel that you can get out of it whatever you're willing to put into it. When I first introduced my summer reading plans, I mentioned the Scorpionfish, but then I also mentioned The Lying Life of Adults by Elena Ferrante. And what I didn't realize at the time, a funny coincidence, is that the epigraph in Scorpionfish is actually a quote from Elena Ferrante. And in an interview, Natalie Bakopolous actually does talk about the deep influence of Elena Ferrante's work on her own writing. I'm going to read a little bit of the epigraph here from Elena Ferrante. Our entire body, like it or not, enacts a stunning resurrection of the dead, just as we advance towards our own death. We are, as you say, interconnected. In the most absolute tranquility or in the midst of tumultuous events, in safety or danger, in innocence or corruption, we are a crowd of others. And that's from Elena Ferrante from her book about her writing life called Frantamuglia. And the storytelling really does feel akin to Ferrante. I was really swept up into the characters' inner lives, inner drama in a similar way as when I'm reading Ferrante's work. And the physical spaces of Athens, the streets and the cafes and the shops that are described felt very similar to the way Ferrante describes the streets and the people of Naples in her works. Also, the kind of political and class commentary is really smoothly incorporated into the narrative, which I feel like Ferrante does as well in her work. And there's also a focus on who is telling the story, whether they have the right to tell the story, which I feel like comes up a lot in the Neapolitan quartet. So as always, I like to think of craft takeaways, and in this instance, I think of the alternating perspectives of Mira and the captain and the purpose behind that choice, and how that emphasizes, again, this exploration into who gets to tell a particular story, how does the story change based on who is telling it, what more can you get, what more can you find out when someone else is telling a story. And then also it heightens the tension of the novel, and you get especially kind of the romantic tension between the captain and Mira when you have the alternating chapters. That I think was a great takeaway. And who is this book for? I think this book is for anyone who loves contemporary literary fiction that is very place-based, is much a portrait of a place and a space as it is about the story or about the characters. If you like stories about immigrant experiences, especially of fitting in between two or more cultures and how that impacts someone's identity. And I do think if you like Elena Ferrante's work, you will enjoy Scorpionfish. Again, I thought that there were some similarities there, and clearly Bakopolous has said that she's been influenced by Ferrante as well. Natalie Bakopolous has written another novel called The Green Shore, published in 2012, and she teaches at Wayne State University in Detroit, and she also teaches a writing class in Greece as well, which is very cool. And she lives in Ann Arbor in Michigan. And her father moved to the United States from Greece, and her mother actually is Ukrainian. She mentioned in another interview that she didn't learn Greek growing up. It sounded like they spoke Ukrainian in their home. And then for follow-up reading, the epigraph comes from Elena Ferrante's Frantamuglia, a writer's journey, and so that might be a really good follow-up. But also in another interview, Bakopolous was answering a question about point of view and how she chose which character's point of view to include, and she mentions a novel by Ayşegül Savaş called Walking on the Ceiling. And she says this novel is partly about storytelling, and to quote Bakopolous, she says, it's about how creating one version of events and people, we eclipse all others. Each word, each line in a story eliminates so many other possibilities. the telling of stories has its moral complications. So if that's an intriguing concept to you, like it is for me, you might be interested in picking up Walking on the Ceiling. Small beer. One of the things I'm going to do on this channel is a small press pick of the month. So I've already done $2 radio, and for the month of August, I am reading some books from a publisher called Small Beer Press. And I'll tell you a little more about the publisher themselves at the end, so stick around for that. Part of the power of independent presses is that their catalog can be small enough to really focus on a message or a vision or just a particular way of looking at the world. That is really what I hope to do here on this channel, is one at a time go through some of these independent publishers and see what they have to say about the world and see what their books kind of say to their readers. So some of these are really obvious, like Feminist Press. Feminist Press is a publisher that advances women's rights and amplifies feminist perspectives. And Charco Press is completely focused on publishing Latin American writing that's been translated into English. Other publishers, it's not necessarily as explicit, so like $2 Radio, they really just have a kind of a feel about them. Their books are really bold and innovative and raw and strange and pushing boundaries. So this month we're having a small beer summer, and we're going to explore this independent publisher called Small Beer Press. So I have my beer here, Small Beer Summer. This is Revolution Brewing Rev Pils, a Chicago Pilsner, and it's just a really light, nice summertime beer. I had my husband like describe the beer to me just a minute ago so I could like tell you about it, like tasting notes and stuff, but that was literally like 3 minutes ago, and it's completely left my brain. So I can talk about books, but I can't really tell you what this beer tastes like other than it tastes pretty good. Let's see what books we have by Small Beer Press. First up, we have Sofia Samatar, and this book is called A Stranger in Olondria. I have read this book. I love this book. I'm going to reread it in August and talk to you a bit more about it. But then I have her two other small beer books along the way. They're on their way from Powell's. Her other two books that are on their way are The Winged Histories and Tender. Tender is short stories, and then The Winged Histories, I believe, is set in the same world maybe as A Stranger in Olondria, or maybe I got that backwards. Anyway, Sofia Samatar is a fantasy writer, and this book is very much about storytelling and books themselves. It's really fantastic. It's all set in this fantastic other world that's very different than our own, but also very similar. Then we have Reconstruction by Alaya Dawn Johnson, and these are short stories. They're speculative fiction, and I'm told that there is an amazing story in here about vampires that's set in Hawaii. So I cannot wait to read this. We're gonna have 2 books by Elizabeth Hand. I am in the middle of this one right now, and let me tell you, so this is Generation Loss, and this is the first of her Cass Neary series. And Cass Neary is a photographer who is a dark and twisted character, who is one of those characters that you love to hate but also love to love. So it's pretty dark. This is I guess a thriller, horror, mystery. It's a Shirley Jackson Award winner. It's about Cass Neary, down and out photographer from New York, who makes her way up to Maine to do what she thinks is supposed to be an interview with this kind of reclusive photographer. I'm over halfway through now, and it's pretty creepy. And then also on its way, her book of short stories called Errantry, and they are called like strange stories. So I think they're fantastical, maybe a little bit sci-fi, definitely speculative, strange, dark fiction. Also not here yet is a book that's the first in a 4-part series called Fire Logic by Laurie J. Marks. It's a fantasy series. It's, from what I heard, it's a female-led epic fantasy series and features a lesbian main protagonist. And it's supposed to have really great elemental magic. It takes place in a land called Shaftal, a fantasy world once thriving on the balance of 4 elemental magics, but now plagued by hatred. Then we have Was by Geoff Ryman. This book takes the characters from The Wizard of Oz, including the author, Frank L. Baum, and imagines them, these characters, kind of in real life, like what those characters might be like if they're living here in our world with us. Martha Moody by Susan Stinson, and this is described as a magical realist sapphic Western romance. Enough said. And finally, also not quite arrived yet, is People in the Castle, Selected Strange Stories by Joan Aiken. And Joan Aiken is a prolific fantasy writer who passed away in 2004. And so these are some of her fantastical stories. Sounds really fabulous. So that's on its way as well. There's 2 Small Beer Press books that were recently published that I've seen around a lot. I don't have them in this selection for August, but I wanted to mention them because you might have seen them around, and so it might give you kind of an idea of what Small Beer Press publishes. One of them is Never Have I Ever by Isabel Yap, and the other is Spirits Abroad, Stories by Zen Cho, and both of them are short story collections. Small Beer Press publishes a lot of really wonderful short story collections. They lean very much towards fantasy, literary fiction, and also you may have noticed that they tend to publish a lot of authors that are kind of rediscovered authors, or authors that haven't, prolific authors that just haven't quite gotten the wide attention that they should. So that is another area they really focus on. So I think you might like Small Beer Press if you like your literary fiction with a side of dark fairy tale. Small Beer Summer. Small Beer Press is based in Northampton, Massachusetts, and it was founded by spouses Gavin Grant and Kelly Link in the year 2000. And Kelly Link herself is one of my favorite short story writers. She's beloved by many. So if you are familiar with Kelly Link's work, it might give you a little feel for their taste and when they're picking books to publish. Definitely leans towards literary, fantastical stories for sure. And small beer, from what I can tell from my research, is kind of an obscure British phrase perhaps that refers to something that is trivial or of little or no consequence. So I'm assuming they use that tongue-in-cheek here as the name of their independent press. So if you want to hear my thoughts on another fantastic independent press, please click wherever, somewhere there will be a link. And if you like the idea of exploring independent presses with me in the future, then I hope you will hit subscribe. Also somewhere, hit a button that will be somewhere around here. Please do that. I look forward to seeing you back here soon. And I think I'm gonna go finish my beer, maybe read a book, and I hope you do something similarly fantastic. Thanks, bye.